To breed or not to breed? That is the question. At least according to an alternate universe version of Shakespeare's Hamlet. There are so many reasons to do so, and so many reasons not to do so. If your reason to breed is because you think it would be fun, it's not particularly a good idea. There are thousands of horses out there without homes because someone thought it would be fun. But if you want to breed your horse because he or she is a very special part of your life, or they have an athletic ability that's sought after in your particular discipline, then this show may be for you.
It's obviously become more sophisticated in the last 50 years than it was prior to that. When it was the time of farmers, etc., and breeding their teams and breeding them strictly as livestock, the only methodology was to tease mares with stallions. When mares would come into heat, they would breed them when they were very receptive. And then it, I think, evolved to a point where they would breed them every other day until the mare went out of heat. They attained good conception rates that way. Everything was live serviced. There was no artificial insemination or anything at that time. Then, somewhere in the 60s, I believe, it was that veterinarians became more involved in trying to be predictive about when a mare should be bred. And they did it with speculum exams, vaginal speculum exams, and they looked at how relaxed the cervix became, meaning the mare was closer to a point of ovulation, be more likely to conceive at that point. And they used the spec exam, basically, to predict when to breed that mare. They'd still breed her more than once, and it was still natural service. Then manual rectal palpation came in. They palpated ovaries, palpated the follicular development of ovaries, tried to predict when they'd ovulate. I actually am old enough that that's when I came on the scene. And we were actually very good at it. I'm staggered now to think back, now that we've got all this technology such as ultrasounds, etc., and we know, we can see what we feel and that sort of thing. It shocks me how good we were at predicting ovulation and getting mares in foal and doing pregnancy evaluation, etc. And then ultrasound came on the scene, and it enhanced, it moved us up tremendously in what we knew, what we learned, our predictability of mares, what help they might need in conceiving, getting very close to breeding them one time with close to ovulation to conceive. The other aspect of having to breed the mare multiple times during a heat cycle in order to establish a pregnancy is that we've gone past all of that now. That used to be a possibility when the mare and the stallion were housed at the same facility and there was a limited number of mares going to a particular stallion. Everybody, veterinarians, horse breeders, etc., have surpassed that now. We've gone past that where that model doesn't work, if you will, because we're breeding to cooled semen that comes from 3,000 miles away. We're breeding with frozen semen on deceased horses in Europe, horses in Saudi Arabia, and that sort of thing. We're breeding natural service to stallions that breed 120 mares a year, not 40 mares a year anymore. So the multiple breeding during a particular cycle just doesnst fit the model anymore. And now we've even evolved into these assisted reproductive techniques, such as embryo transfer, oocyte aspiration with the use of ICSI and certain assisted reproductive technologies that are now growing in leaps and bounds. Simply show how semen is collected from a horse, whether it's for fresh insemination, cooled ship, frozen. This process is all the same.
The boy is going by me.
in his corner, that's home base. That's where he gets washed. That's where he starts. That's where he finishes. That's where he goes if he messes around. That's where he goes if things get a little dicey in here with a mare, for instance. He gets to feel safe in that corner. He feels confident with his handler in that corner. We're going to collect the stallion on the phantom. The mare is just used to tease the stallion down. This particular stallion probably doesn't need the mare. It'll make things go well today. Obviously, he came down, he dropped down, he's interested in the mare. This same process is used whether we're going to breed or inseminate a mare with fresh semen, whether we're going to prepare a dose to ship it cooled for use tomorrow or the next day. And it's the same if we're going to use, if we're going to prepare frozen semen. So the collection process can vary to some degree with extenders, with how we collect the horse, but those are all nuances, if you will. The basics of this process are the same. Chelsea has prepared an AV, the acronym for artificial vagina. There are several different companies that make these.
Ready? Ready.
Yep, they're all ready. Everybody that's in this process needs to be aware of each other. Keep the horses from getting injured, keep each other from getting injured. Let your pressure off right away, huh? I guarantee you got it.
Yep.
Put all that pressure off and shake your AV to get your semen down into that cup. Now, as I said, it wouldn't matter. From here, the process changes within the laboratory, depending if we're going to just inseminate a mare directly, ship it for cooled semen, or freeze it for future use. The laboratory procedures change, but this process is basically the same. It's more dependent upon the horse than it is upon the procedure. How we're going to breed this mare principally means what kind of semen are we going to use? Are we going to breed the mare natural service with fresh semen, obviously, is being natural service? Are we going to AI the mare with fresh semen? Are we going to ship in cooled semen? Or are we going to breed her with frozen semen? And if we're going to breed her with frozen semen, what we'd like to have is we'd like to have that semen stored here at this facility so it's available to us anytime we need to breed the mare. If we're going to breed natural service, as in the thoroughbred world, then we're going to want to know how far in advance we need to book this mare, which is based upon how busy the stallion is. If it's cooled semen horses are shipped on particular days. They may be collected for their semen on only Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for instance, or it may be even days of the month or odd days of the month. All of that is going to tell me when I'm going to need to call for that semen. And then by seeing where the mare is in her cycle, I can decide, well, I need to check her back this day to be this much more predictive of when I need to breed the mare. So that's going to tell me exactly when I need to check her again, call for semen, have them alerted to the fact I need it on a particular day for their next collection schedule. With frozen semen, we have a narrower window when we can breed the mare because the semen only lives a short amount of time in the mare's reproductive tract. So that too is going to dictate when I'm going to check this mare again and how often I'm going to check this mare. So how you're going to breed the mare, if you will, in other words, what kind of semen or what stallion you're going to use, all enters into the picture in telling you how to manage this mare. It isn't just the mare's cycle, it's the stallion's availability and type of semen you're going to use that also tells you whether or not you're going to check this mare and how often you're going to check this mare.
There's the difference between cooled semen and frozen semen. Some people say that the frozen semen is not as effective, the mare doesn't catch as well. Is that true or not true?
All semen is dependent upon the horse himself. Some horses don't cool well, some horses don't freeze well, and so it varies with the stallion. I think if you look at statistical ability for different types of semen to impregnate a mare, when you try to remove every variable, you've got good semen, you've got a good fertile mare, you breed her at the appropriate time. Fresh semen is going to edge out cooled semen, and cooled semen is going to edge out frozen semen. But it isn't by much. It's probably by about 5 degrees or 5 percentage points, excuse me, on a per cycle basis. So fresh semen ought to get a mare pregnant about 65, 70, maybe 75% of the time if the horse is real strong. Cooled semen is more like 60 to 65% of the time, maybe 55%, and frozen is somewhere 50 to 55%. So if you keep those kind of statistical averages in mind, then you have variabilities with the mare's reproductive health and with the stallion semen. So there more variables enter into it. We're going to do an embryo flush on this mare to try to recover an embryo from her uterus. This mare was bred 8 days ago. She ovulated 7 days ago. It's typical to flush mares on either the 7th or 8th day after ovulation. If you wait longer than that, the embryos become too fragile. If you do it much earlier than that, the embryos aren't in the uterus yet. We can do them at 6 or 6.5 days preferably, 6.5 preferred over 6, because they should definitely be in the uterus at that time. Some older mares probably have a slower oviductal transport, meaning that the embryo takes longer to reach the uterus, and a lot of older mares are done on 8 days instead of 7 for that reason. The reason we do 6.5 day flushes is if we're going to freeze embryos or biopsy embryos, because that smaller embryo freezes better and it's easier to biopsy. So those are the reasons we pick different days, but a lot of our ET mares are flushed on day 7 at this facility. So that's where we are with her today. The first thing we're going to do is bandage her tail, basically wrap it, get it out of the way, keep things cleaner for the procedure. So that's what Chelsea started to do here with this mare. Mare's been cleaned out rectally, her vulva's been washed, she's all ready to go. She's ready for us to insert the flush catheter, which will travel through her cervix, and a bulb, an air bulb, as you can see right here, is blown up on the anterior side of the cervix within the uterus, and then that bulb is pulled against the cervix to actually close it. So now our uterus is a blind pouch, if you will, and can be expanded and drained several times to siphon that embryo out of the uterus through the tubing and into our filter cup. So that's the whole purpose of this. That embryo is basically free within the uterine lumen. It travels through the uterine lumen by uterine contractions at this stage. We're going to fill that uterus with fluid, drain that fluid off, and that siphoning activity is actually going to pull that embryo, if you will, out through the tubing into a filter cup that Chelsea will hold, and it'll be trapped within that filter cup. So this is how that process works. Now that cup is ready to be flushed into a search dish, and the dish searched for the embryo. Chelsea's going to spill this cup into this gridded search dish, and then we're going to help rinse the content of this cup, the sides, the grid, etc., with this same flush media. Everything's being done with sterile flush media. This cup is rinsed out. So if there's an embryo sticking to the cup, we've hopefully freed it and it's ready to be looked at under the dissecting microscope. A little trick is we actually do a swirl like this. These embryos sink to the bottom of the fluid. They sit on the bottom, and because they're round, they will actually roll. So this swirling technique will roll most embryos to the center of the plate, allowing us to quickly find it if it's in there. Okay, there we have it. We have a 7-day embryo. It looks good. It looks very normal. It would probably grade a 1, but we'll take it from this dish now and put it in a holding dish. Handle the embryo using a 1/4 cc straw hooked to a tuberculin syringe. I'm going to actually wash this embryo because some of what comes out from the embryo flush is some uterine cellular debris, and I don't want that debris to go into the recipient mare. It can become a little inflammatory if it does so. So I'm actually going to use my 1/4 cc straw here to pull up the embryo. I don't try not to touch the embryo. I work with it with the current that I create by the syringe being drawn in and out. So I deposit the embryo there, and then I take it from droplet to droplet, and if it has some cellular debris attached, it will basically fall off of there through this activity of moving it from clean media into the next clean media. This thing, it looks good and it is clean of any debris. I'll go into one more droplet and call it quits. And then I'm going to place it in the holding media here, and here it will sit until it is actually transferred into the recipient mare. Embryo transfer was certainly the first glimmer that this could all be done, but these other technologies certainly have expanded on that even. But we can take that cutting mare, if you will, that's still campaigning relatively vigorously, and she can come to a facility such as this, be bred, an embryo flush from her, put in a recipient mare, and off she goes back to the arena. And so it's great. She's now doing well enough to be a broodmare potential, but she's still competing, she's still winning, and she's still and now she's producing foals at the same time. So it's a great asset to the breeder and to the horse owner. The oocyte aspiration is where the ICSI procedure starts, and it starts with actually going to the ovary with a needle, inserting that needle in a follicle where the egg resides, and withdrawing that egg from that follicle within the ovary. And there's two basic ways that this is done, and to be a little bit simplistic about it, you can deal with the mature ovulatory follicle. In other words, that follicle that is the reason the mare's in heat. It brought her into heat. It's going to ovulate on its own in a short period of time. You harvest that egg from that follicle, and in that case you're usually working with a single oocyte, a single follicle. The other technique is to deal with immature follicles, where you can also harvest eggs, harvest oocytes from those follicles. And in that technique, you can do multiple eggs or multiple oocytes in a particular, or in a single aspiration session. Eggs at this stage can't be frozen. The technology isn't there. Embryos can be frozen. So once the egg is fertilized and develops into an embryo, embryos can be frozen just as sperm or semen can be. And things that are cryopreserved, such as semen or embryos, we think are basically there forever. As long as the cryopreservation is maintained, that those cells will be viable forever, basically, when they're thawed. But we're not there with eggs yet in the equine. So I think the technology will get there. I think it'll be figured out by some of these brilliant researchers. So far, we're not there. Where they actually take a single egg that you recover from the mare's ovary. That egg then needs to go through a maturation process within the laboratory, within the incubator, and in media for a period of time. And then it matures to the point it's ready to be fertilized. And a single sperm cell is injected into that single egg or oocyte, and fertilization then can occur. And it's a very sophisticated procedure. It's being done by more facilities around the country and around the world than, every year more people are engaging in it. But it's still a very sophisticated science, and but it's allowing us to preserve the genetics of some of these mares that we wouldn't be able to get pregnant, or get embryos even for embryo transfer. So in some respects, for some mares, it's a little bit of a last ditch. They've not been able to get pregnant to carry. They become unfit for embryo transfer, for instance. And now, gee, what are we going to do? We still love the genetics of this mare. We want to produce more foals from this mare. So now we've evolved to going directly to the ovary, aspirating the egg or the oocyte, and injecting the sperm in vitro in the laboratory, and developing the embryo, and then putting it back into either a recipient mare, a surrogate mare, if you will, or maybe even and sometimes the mare herself. It has also allowed us to use some semen from stallions that is inadequate to fertilize mares to get pregnancies with normal or even more sophisticated artificial insemination techniques. It's allowed us to take horses that are deceased but have frozen semen allotments that are very small and stretch that out so that maybe we have enough semen from that horse to create one pregnancy with normal artificial insemination, whereas we could create hundreds, even thousands of pregnancies through this oocyte aspiration / ICSI technique. So these techniques have allowed us to really take the genetics of some of these horses and preserve them for a long time, and I think that's a great deal.
Shows the process of ICSI in action. You can see that the oocyte is being held in tight apposition to the holding pipette through the action of negative pressure with the holding pipette. And this is the injection drill pipette. It's brought right up to the outside edge of the zona pellucida, and this is controlled by a piezoelectric motor. Basically it vibrates at a rate so fast, even on the microscope at 40 power, I cannot see it move, but it's moving. And again, negative pressure is exerted at the same time this is brought directly up to the zona pellucida, and then the piezoelectric motor is activated, and the idea is to drill your way through the zona until you hit this membrane, this very sharply defined membrane right here. But before we go there, let me mention this. Can you see this little object right here in the drill? Mm-hmm. That's sperm.
One thing to always keep in mind, as you advance technologically, you also drop in success rate, and you advance as well in cost. So everything you try to do every time you ramp up the technology, you really have ramped up your options, but you haven't ramped up your success rate, but you have increased your costs. So a lot of these things certainly aren't for everybody to play with or to try to take on. You have to manage your own expectations. You have to realize that if I'm going to embryo transfer, or if I'm going to oocyte transfer, if I'm going to ICSI, it's going to cost me more money, and my chances are going to be less for success. So you have to have a reason to do it. You have to want to preserve a mare's genetics, a stallion's genetics. You have to have the right reason to meet those expectations. What we forget about, I think, is as this technology changes, it changes really slowly. It changes over years and decades. You know, I've been doing this a long time, and what I see now is that things we're doing now routinely didn't even exist 35 years ago. So I think it changes slowly, but as things change, we take them for granted because it does happen slowly. And so now we're looking at the future and we're thinking to ourselves, well, gee, that might be over the top. That might be a little scary. But I think if we reflect back on what we're doing today routinely, we had those same thoughts 35 years ago. So I'm not sure that technology is bringing anything bad to it. I think it's expanding our abilities to do things, and we just have to manage that all with a conscience.